Ever wondered how immigration policies reshape the lives of millions? Which countries faced the highest deportation rates under President Donald Trump's administration? And how did these policies impact global communities? Hello, explorers! Welcome back to Discovering the Earth. Today, we embark on a journey to uncover the top 10 countries whose citizens faced the highest deportation rates from the USA during Donald Trump's presidency. Stay tuned to learn how these policies affected nations worldwide. But before we dive in, here's a quick question for you. Which country do you think had the highest number of its citizens deported from the USA during this period? Drop your guesses in the comments below. And here's something to ponder as we explore these stories. How do deportation policies influence the cultural and economic landscapes of both the deporting and receiving countries? We'll unravel this throughout our journey today. Let's begin our countdown, starting from number 10, Colombia. Colombia, a land of breathtaking mountains, aromatic coffee plantations, and vibrant cities like Bogotá and Medellín. But beyond the postcard beauty lies a challenging reality for thousands of Colombians who found themselves on the wrong side of U.S. immigration policies. Under the Trump administration, Colombia ranked among the top countries whose citizens faced deportation. Many had lived in the U.S. for years, some since childhood, building lives, families, and dreams, only to be suddenly sent back to a homeland that, for some, had become foreign ground. Imagine waking up one morning in Florida and finding yourself sipping Tinto back in Bogotá. Not by choice, but because ICE decided it's time for a homecoming. For many deported Colombians, the harshest challenge wasn't just the journey back. It was starting over in a country still healing from decades of armed conflict and narco-violence. Job opportunities were scarce, and support systems even scarcer. Some returnees landed in regions plagued by the same dangers they once fled. Others struggled with the stigma of being labeled deportados, as if being forced out of the U.S. turned them into outcasts back home. What's worse, many hadn't set foot in Colombia for decades. Some didn't even speak fluent Spanish anymore, leading to situations funnier than a bad telenovela. Imagine asking for Wi-Fi in rural Colombia and getting handed a cup of coffee instead. Now, here's something to think about as we move forward. Did you know that many of these deportations tore families apart, leaving children in the U.S. while parents were sent thousands of miles away? A brutal reminder that immigration policies don't just remove people, they fracture lives. And here's the kicker. Colombia's economy, already dependent on remittances, took a hit with the loss of its workforce abroad. So is deportation really solving a problem, or creating new ones on both sides of the border? Stick around, because the next country on our list will surprise you even more. Number 9, Peru. Peru, home to ancient civilizations, stunning landscapes, and of course, the mighty Machu Picchu. But behind the postcard views of llamas and Incan ruins, Peru has also been grappling with economic challenges that pushed many of its people to seek better lives in the United States. Skilled workers, laborers, and entire families moved north, dreaming of a brighter future. Yet under Trump's strict immigration crackdown, thousands of these Peruvians suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of the law, facing deportation orders that came faster than you can say gracias. What's ironic? Many had lived peacefully in the U.S. for years, paying taxes, raising families, and contributing to the economy, until Uncle Sam decided it was time for an all-expense-paid trip back home. Now, for those who don't know, remittances from the U.S. form a crucial part of Peru's economy. In fact, according to World Bank reports, billions flow into Peru every year, helping families build homes, fund education, and invest in small businesses. But when deportations spiked, that steady flow of dollars took a hit. Entire families who relied on their loved ones abroad were left scrambling. And what's worse, many deportees returned to a country they barely remembered or hadn't seen since childhood. Picture this. A guy lands in Lima after 15 years, looks around, and says, "Where's the nearest Starbucks?" Only to be pointed to a local market selling corn and alpaca wool. Culture shock much? But here's where it gets serious, folks. Large-scale deportations didn't just shake families. They strained Peru's fragile social systems. Job markets couldn't absorb the sudden influx of returning citizens, leading many to poverty and, in some cases, pushing them toward crime or dangerous migration attempts. Again, makes you wonder, is deportation really the solution, or just a vicious cycle? And if you think Peru's story is tough, wait till you hear which country comes next. It's even more heartbreaking. So stay with me, because the deeper we go, the more shocking it gets. Number 8, El Salvador. El Salvador, a country known for its colorful festivals, rich coffee plantations, and the warm smiles of its people. But behind those scenic landscapes lies a harsh reality that's driven countless Salvadorans to seek refuge in the United States. For years, El Salvador has been plagued by extreme gang violence, poverty, and limited job opportunities. Families risked everything, crossing borders, surviving deserts, and chasing the so-called American dream, just to find safety and a better life. But under Trump's aggressive deportation policies, thousands were sent back, often to the same neighborhoods they once fled. And trust me, this wasn't a vacation. It was like surviving a storm, only to be thrown right back into the eye of it. What made matters worse was that many of these deportees had spent decades in the U.S., building lives, families, and careers. Some barely spoke Spanish anymore. Imagine landing in San Salvador, looking around confused and asking, "Does anyone know where the nearest Walmart is?" Only to get a stare that says, "Welcome home, and good luck." Even worse, deportations didn't just send people back. They sometimes sent back individuals with deep ties to gangs like MS-13. And suddenly, El Salvador found itself facing an unintended consequence: the rise of organized crime, fueled by deported gang members who carried American street smarts back home. Now that's what you call a return policy gone wrong. And here's a scary thought for you. Experts say that many of these deportations destabilized local communities and pushed El Salvador deeper into its cycle of violence. So the question is, were these policies fixing a problem or feeding the fire? And if families risked everything once to escape, what's stopping them from trying again and again? Stick around, because up next, we're diving into a country that shares a similar fate. But the twist in their story might just surprise you. Number 7, India. Ah, India, the land of vibrant festivals, centuries-old traditions, and a billion dreams. From Silicon Valley techies to hard-working truck drivers, Indians have long been one of the largest immigrant groups contributing to the U.S. economy. But during Trump's presidency, even this community wasn't spared. Tighter visa restrictions, increased scrutiny on H-1Bs, and immigration raids led to a significant rise in deportations. Many of those sent back weren't criminals. They were students, IT professionals, and small business owners who simply got caught up in changing policies. Imagine spending years chasing the American dream, only to get a knock on the door saying, "Pack up, it's time to go home." Talk about a plot twist worse than a Bollywood soap opera. What most people don't realize is that these deportations triggered a silent crisis back in India. Families that had invested everything, sold land, borrowed money to send their children to the U.S. suddenly found themselves back at square one. And worse, the social stigma. In many Indian communities, being deported is whispered about like some dark family secret, almost as if the person came back from jail instead of America. Some returnees struggled to reintegrate, facing not just joblessness, but the constant judgment of nosy relatives. You know the type. "Ari Beta, back so soon? Didn't America like you?" If only they knew the real story. But here's the twist. While deportations ruined dreams for many, it also created fear among thousands still living undocumented in the US overnight. Suddenly, the same people who once proudly shared their life in America stories were avoiding phone calls from back home. Why? Because how do you explain to your family that the American dream might just turn into a nightmare? Now ask yourself, is this the future we're heading toward? And trust me, the next country on our list, their story hits even harder. Stay with me, because things are about to get even more intense. Number 6. Honduras. Honduras, a country blessed with stunning Caribbean beaches, dense rainforests, and a rich Mayan history. But beneath that beauty, it's also a nation battling poverty, political corruption, and rampant gang violence. For years, countless Hondurans saw only one way out, making the dangerous journey north, often on foot, dreaming of safety and a better future in the United States. But under Trump's aggressive immigration policies, those dreams were crushed. Thousands of Hondurans, including women, children, and even elderly folks, were detained and sent back. Imagine surviving a perilous trek through deserts, only to be handed a one-way ticket home, and not the good kind. More like, welcome back. By the way, the problems you ran from? Yeah, they're still here. Now here's where it gets worse. The US deported so many Hondurans in such a short time that shelters in cities like San Pedro Sula and Tegucigalpa overflowed. Local resources, already stretched thin, couldn't handle the sudden influx. Many deportees returned with nothing. No home, no money, no job. Just the clothes on their backs and the trauma of being yanked from the country they hoped would save them. Some even faced immediate danger, dropped right back into gang-controlled neighborhoods they had risked everything to escape. Imagine the fear of stepping off that plane, wondering if someone is waiting, not to greet you, but to punish you. Chilling, isn't it? But let me leave you with this thought. Honduras relies heavily on money sent home by those working abroad. These remittances fuel entire communities. So what happens when those breadwinners are forced back with empty pockets? It's not just personal lives being shattered, it's the economy itself. Now tell me, is it really solving a problem or creating an even bigger one? Think about it. And stick around, because coming up next is a country where the impact of deportation hit even closer to home, in ways you might not expect. Number 5. Ecuador. Ecuador, a land where the Amazon rainforest, towering Andes Mountains, and the stunning Galapagos Islands all come together. But behind its natural beauty lies a nation where poverty and unemployment have long driven its people to seek better opportunities abroad, especially in the United States. Over the years, thousands of Ecuadorians left everything behind, family, home, roots, to chase the American dream, sending back every hard-earned dollar to support loved ones. Yet, under the Trump administration's strict deportation policies, many of these dreams came crashing down. Families who once celebrated every money transfer from New York or Chicago suddenly found their loved ones back at their doorstep, jobless, hopeless, and with nothing but a suitcase full of shattered dreams. And let's be honest, not exactly the homecoming anyone was hoping for. You see, Ecuador heavily depends on remittances. In fact, billions flow into the country every year, keeping small businesses afloat and putting food on the table for millions. But the mass deportations created a ripple effect. Families lost their primary breadwinners overnight. Some parents returned to find their children no longer recognized them. Others were too ashamed to face their villages, branded as failures, simply because they came back empty-handed. And let's not forget, many of these deportees had lived in the U.S. for so long, they barely remembered how things worked back home. Imagine asking for Wi-Fi in a mountain village and being handed a llama instead. Welcome back to reality, amigo. But here's the real question. What happens to a community when its lifeline suddenly dries up? How does a family adjust when the one person holding them together is suddenly tossed back into the chaos with no job, no plan, and no hope? It's a ticking time bomb, one that's already blowing cracks into Ecuador's fragile economy and social fabric. And trust me, if you think this is bad, wait until you see who's next. The country coming up faced even bigger challenges, and the impact of deportation there? It's downright terrifying. Stay with me. Number 4. Guatemala. Guatemala, a land of ancient Mayan ruins, breathtaking volcanoes, and vibrant markets bursting with colors. But behind the beauty lies a harsh reality: poverty, violence, and corruption that have driven generations of Guatemalans to seek refuge and opportunities in the United States. For many, migrating north wasn't just a dream, it was survival. But during the Trump administration's tough immigration crackdown, thousands of Guatemalans were ripped from the lives they built and sent back to a country they risked everything to escape. And here's the heartbreaking part. Many of them had spent years, even decades, working hard, raising families, and contributing to the U.S. economy, only to find themselves boarding a plane home with nothing but a deportation order in their hands. The impact on Guatemala? Massive. Remittances from migrants are the backbone of the country's economy, making up nearly 20% of its GDP. Families depended on that monthly cash flow for basic needs: food, education, healthcare. But with so many forced returns, communities that once thrived on those dollars found themselves spiraling into deeper poverty. And for the deportees, reintegration was a nightmare. Imagine coming back after 15 years to a place where you barely remember the language or the culture and being welcomed with, "So, failed in America, huh?" Brutal. Worse still, many were dropped right back into the neighborhoods, controlled by the same gangs they once fled. A terrifying full-circle moment no one deserved. Now let me leave you with this. What happens when thousands of desperate, unemployed returnees flood an already strained country? Jobs are scarce, crime rates surge, and social systems collapse under the pressure. Guatemala became a boiling pot of poverty, violence, and fear. And many of those deported started planning the journey north, all over again. Because when survival is at stake, do you really have a choice? Stick around, because if you think this was intense, the next country's story might just shock you even more. Number 3. Mexico. Mexico. Rich in culture, history, and tacos that could make anyone forget their problems, at least for a while. But when it comes to U.S. immigration and deportation, Mexico has always been at the center of the story. Sharing a 2,000-mile-long border with the U.S., it's no surprise that Mexicans made up a large portion of those deported during Trump's crackdown. But here's what most people don't realize. Many of those deported weren't newcomers. They were folks who had lived in the U.S. for decades, homeowners, parents of U.S.-born kids, hard-working individuals who built lives only to be uprooted overnight. Imagine spending 20 years chasing the American dream, and suddenly you're on a bus headed back, wondering, was that all just a really long vacation? The economic impact? Devastating. Border towns like Tijuana and Ciudad Juarez, were overwhelmed with waves of deportees. Thousands arriving every week with nowhere to go, no job, and no family waiting. Shelters overflowed, crime rates spiked, and local services buckled under the pressure. Many returnees didn't even know where they belonged anymore. Too Americanized for Mexico, but no longer welcome in the US. Some couldn't speak fluent Spanish. Imagine showing up at your abuela's doorstep and struggling to order a taco because you've been saying, "Can I get a burrito to go?" your whole life. Now that's a cultural slap in the face. But here's the part that hits hardest. Many deported parents left their children behind in the US, creating broken families and legal nightmares. Children ended up in foster care, while parents faced the impossible choice: risk crossing the border again or stay separated forever. So the question is, did these mass deportations really fix anything, or just create more problems on both sides of the border? And if you think Mexico's situation is complicated, wait till you hear about the next country. Because their story might just leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the immigration debate. Stay with me. It only gets more intense from here. Number 2. Venezuela. Venezuela, once one of the richest countries in South America, thanks to its vast oil reserves. But today, it's a nation battling one of the worst economic and political crises in modern history. Hyperinflation, food shortages, power outages, you name it, Venezuela's been through it. So it's no surprise that millions of Venezuelans fled their homeland, seeking refuge and a shot at survival in countries like the US. But under Trump's strict immigration policies, even this desperate group wasn't spared. Many Venezuelans, some of whom had already escaped one nightmare, suddenly found themselves facing another. A deportation notice from the very country they hoped would protect them. And as one deportee joked, "I left Venezuela to escape chaos, and now I'm back. Even the chaos looks surprised to see me." The sad reality is, sending people back to Venezuela wasn't just a political move. It was a humanitarian disaster. Many of these deportees returned to a country on the brink of collapse. Hospitals with no medicine, supermarkets with empty shelves, and a job market that barely exists. Some families had to choose between buying a loaf of bread or a bottle of cooking oil, because that's how bad hyperinflation is. And for the deportees, starting over wasn't even an option. It was survival. Imagine being dropped back into a country where you don't know if the lights will be on tomorrow or if the local currency is worth anything by lunchtime. That's not deportation. That's a return to a life-threatening situation. But here's the kicker. Despite the crisis, the deportations kept coming, forcing Venezuela to absorb people it simply couldn't support. So what happens when a sinking ship is forced to take back passengers it had already lost? Things only get worse. And speaking of worse, we've finally reached the country with the highest number of deportations under Trump. Trust me, the number will shock you. And the story behind it? Even more heartbreaking. Stay with me. The countdown's final destination is coming up next. Number 1, Haiti. And finally, taking the number 1 spot, a country whose story is as heartbreaking as it is eye-opening, Haiti. Known for its vibrant culture, resilient people, and rich history as the first Black republic, Haiti has faced more than its share of tragedies. Earthquakes, hurricanes, political instability, and extreme poverty have forced millions of Haitians to flee their homeland over the years. Many sought refuge in the United States, working hard, building families, and sending money back home to keep their loved ones afloat. But under Trump's aggressive immigration enforcement, Haiti saw record-breaking deportation numbers, a move that left thousands facing a terrifying return to a country they barely remembered. And that wasn't ready for them. Now imagine this. You spend 15 years living in Florida, working 2 jobs, raising American-born kids. And then, one morning, you're loaded on a plane and dropped into Port-au-Prince, where even the airport looks like it's waiting for aid. No home, no job, no support. Just the same streets you once risked your life to escape. And what's worse, many of these deportations happened while Haiti was reeling from deadly natural disasters, including the 2010 earthquake and the 2021 presidential assassination, events that crippled the country's economy and infrastructure. One deportee even said it felt less like deportation and more like being sent straight into survival mode. Dark humor, but painfully true. But here's the real kicker. Haiti is a country where remittances from the US make up nearly a third of its economy. So every deportation didn't just break a family, it chipped away at the country's only remaining lifeline. Families were left shattered, local resources stretched to the breaking point, and crime surged as returnees struggled to survive. And now the terrifying question hangs in the air. When you deport people back to a country on the edge of collapse, how long before they try to flee again? Because when there's no food, no safety, and no future, isn't running your only option? Stick around as we wrap up, because what I'm about to tell you next might just change the way you see the entire immigration debate. And there you have it, travelers. The top 10 countries that faced the harshest deportation waves under Donald Trump's presidency. From the rich coffee lands of Colombia to the struggling streets of Haiti, every number we shared today wasn't just a statistic. It was a family torn apart, a dream shattered, and a community left to pick up the pieces. While immigration is a complex issue with no easy solutions, one thing is clear. Behind every deportation is a human story. People who crossed borders, chased dreams, and fought for a better life. Some made it. Others got sent back with nothing but memories and regrets. And here's something to think about. Did these policies make America safer? Or did they create a new humanitarian crisis right at our doorstep? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. And if this video opened your eyes, even just a little, do me a favor, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear these stories. Because this is the reality we rarely see in the headlines. And hey, don't forget to subscribe, because on this channel, we don't just discover places. We discover the untold truths of our world. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and as always, keep discovering the Earth.